Hi, I'm Claire from Leading Minds, and thank you so much for joining me today for this podcast. With 97% of lawyers complaining that stress is impacting their health, I think it's time that we talk about how challenging the pressures in the legal industry can be. So this podcast is a space where lawyers can discuss how they've overcome the challenges they face in their role and gone on to thrive within their career. So whether you're a trainee, a partner, or anyone in between, I really hope that this podcast will leave you feeling inspired, empowered, and with the confidence that you can leave your mark on the legal industry. So today I am very happy to be joined by Sharon Banga, who is a senior associate at Shoosmiths and actually has over 15 years experience within the legal industry. And today she's going to be telling us about how thinking outside the box might be the secret to landing your dream job. So thank you so much for joining me today.
You're welcome. It's great to be involved.
And I thought maybe you could just start with a little introduction to yourself and kind of tell me a little bit about your journey into the legal industry.
Well, I started my legal career, I suppose, in terms of thinking about legal career when I was doing my A-levels. I was thinking about what would best suit my the A-levels that I was taking. I'm not going to lie and say I was at that stage. I knew I was going to be a lawyer. I wanted to know what to do to match my A-levels. And at the time, I came up with psych and law. And if I'm honest, I was still confused. And I kind of thought, well, what do? I started talking to the people around me. I didn't come from like a background that had legal connections or even really much of an educational background. So I just kind of trusted those around me and spoke to people at school as to what they thought I should do. And I think one of the things that someone said is that because I had a bit of an argumentative nature, that it'd be a good thing for me to do. And then that combined with the fact that admittedly, I'm from an Indian culture, and a lot of emphasis is put on security and building a career and a future for yourself. So I think that probably did shape me going into law a bit more. And so I went for it, got a place at University of Birmingham, which I was really happy with because it was local to where I lived. I did live out for university, and I absolutely loved the degree, loved the place that I'd chosen. But what I must say is I got towards the end and I wasn't really sure about what I was going to do. There were certain standout parts of the degree, such as medical law, which I thought were great, and I would have loved to have pursued something, but I wasn't sure how to shape that. And a lot is kind of told to you about vacation schemes and applying for training contracts, all of which I tried to do, but it didn't really work for me. To the extent that I did a lot of applications, and I think at some stage, particularly towards the end of the degree, I got a little bit, I think I just got, I felt really, really disheartened by the rejections and the approach that we were being expected to take, that I actually, shortly before my exams, I actually put a stop to it. And I said, look, whatever will be. And I'm just going to focus on getting this degree, make sure I at least come out of this experience with that. And then we can see what happens afterwards. So we did that. I got my degree. And then I kind of was in that position, which I know a lot of people are, especially now when the opportunities are a bit more limited, I think, where you finish your degree and you're kind of like, what next? What do I do? And I just decided just to take a bit of time out, do just a regular summer job after the degree, and then just see where I go. But I thought to myself, I'm going to carry on applying, but I decided to change what I was applying for. I carried on doing some of the training contract applications, but I wanted to start doing paralegal applications in the hope that I'd kind of get into a job, get my foot in the door, and then see what happens. And that's how I got my first job as a paralegal.
Amazing. So did you paralegal before you then did the LPC, or
yes.
did you do the LPC?
Yes. Well, yeah. So because I'd kind of come out with the degree without the training contract, I thought, well, I'm going to give myself some time. It was a really big financial commitment as well. So in my mind, I thought, if I can't get the training contract in the traditional way in terms of someone sponsoring me for the LPC, at the very least, I'll get like some money in and if I can get a paralegal job, that would be great. So I think I changed my mindset and thought, well, actually, if I can get some legal experience and make some money at the same time, I will have achieved something. And it actually, now, as you'll probably hear, that it was the best thing that happened for me. I really, really value that I didn't get a training contract earlier, because I think if I had, I wouldn't be where I am today.
That's interesting. So before we go into that, I'd really love to hear your opinion on, because I do think, you know, for many people, and especially at the moment, as, you know, jobs are really few and far between, and especially as people are maybe feeling they're deferred, you know, there's so much uncertainty in the market at the moment. I think a lot of people are maybe feeling quite overwhelmed and disheartened, as you said. And you know, you've kind of gone on to say, actually, you think that there was quite a lot of benefits to you from stepping back and not taking the traditional route. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about, you know, what benefits you actually thought you got from
Well,
changing
I think
your
they range
mindset.
from just simple learning simple skills such as being in an office. So I'd had summer jobs before. I'd worked in an office environment, but I hadn't worked fully, other than work experiences, in a legal environment. So learning the basics of how things operate, how an office works, how the structure works. So in the fact that there are paralegals, legal assistants, PAs, and then obviously fee earners, how all that works, and getting really comfortable in that environment was the first thing. And that's quite an abstract thing. It's difficult to describe, but actually the benefit of it later on was a lot. Like I really think it gave me a reference point of how to act in that situation and how to handle myself. And then of course, like if you're lucky enough to paralegal in an area that you want to work in later on, you're learning it from the bottom up, and actually that's the best place, because I mean, with hindsight now, I know exactly what the paralegals in my department and the people that I've trained and the people that I assist now in their career, what they've been through. And I think the benefit of me being able to say I was in your position once is it's great, because I know I think I know how to help them. I know what they're going through. I know the struggles, and hopefully I can kind of contribute towards assisting with that. But I think in terms of working in the area, you also learn, you gain your connections, you learn the procedure. So I mean, I didn't start off in medical negligence, which is what I do now. I started off doing a dual role in personal injury and costs. And at the start, I actually really enjoyed the personal injury side of things. The costs, I was just like, well, it's numbers, it's not really me. I don't really see, if I'm honest, at the time, I don't see the point of it. And it was half my job for the first
Never
but
good.
now I realise, you realise actually what are we all working towards? It's towards making the money that the costs department sort out. And because I'd worked with in costs for a limited period of time, I actually learned how to do your job better, because you're learning what is recoverable, what's not. And it's something that I just wouldn't have learned had I not been there at the right place at the right time. And equally with the personal injury, like I said, I enjoyed that more. It's so closely linked to medical negligence because it works on the same procedure, that it gave me a really, really good idea of what it was to pursue a claim, to act for clients, to act with clients, and also to navigate other areas of my field where you're dealing with medical experts and medical terminology. And you're at a stage where actually, I mean, even now, I always say to my peers, no question is too stupid, but really when you were starting out, no question is too stupid. So it gave me an opportunity to get all of the silly questions, or what might be perceived to be silly questions, out of the way, to the point that when I actually did start getting into a training contract, was newly qualified, that I think I knew a lot more about what I was doing than had I just gone in at that stage. Definitely.
Yeah. That's so interesting, because I must say, like, I remember, you know, I did go the traditional route, and it was something that just kind of happened that way. I was very, very fortunate that it kind of fell into place quite easily, actually, for me. No idea how. But I actually joined, you know, and I remember I'd worked in many office environments before, whether that was like temping over summers or like working in different offices. But when you kind of enter that legal environment, it was just that pressure that I just didn't know, you know. And even the first 2 weeks, just thinking like the IT systems, and it was just stuff I'd never used before, like filing my emails and the different matter numbers, client numbers, all those things. It felt really overwhelming. So as you said, you know, having that experience as a paralegal actually does kind of give you that chance to kind of practice, you know, those stupid questions and find out the things that you need to know from everyone, so you're not feeling completely overwhelmed on a daily basis. So yeah, I do think it
gives you a step up. And even little things like time recording, like I just would not have appreciated that had I not had the paralegal experience. Obviously, if I had gone in as a training contractor, you of course learn about it, but actually having, because as a paralegal, we did have a certain amount of pressure on us to, I mean, it wasn't as time record focused at that stage, but you did know that you had to record and that converted into costs. So you became aware of the way in which you needed to operate to get the costs out of each case.
I think it's interesting though, because often I think about things that I didn't particularly like doing, not just necessarily whilst I was a lawyer, in various different elements of my life, and it's all helped me get closer to what, you know, now I would class as doing a job I absolutely love. And there's many different elements that come with that, and like living in a place that I absolutely love as well. So I do think that, as you said, you know, you didn't particularly enjoy the cause. However, in retrospect, you can see how it got you to where you are now. And I think that's a really important message for anyone that is, you know, a junior member of the team, or maybe feeling, you know, I'm not really sure whether this is for me, that it's giving you the skill set you need to kind of get closer to where you want to go. And I do think that there's more flexibility within the legal industry than people actually think. It's not a case of, you know, applying for a job, and many people are maybe facing this at the moment, again, as, you know, jobs are kind of a little bit less than in an ideal situation, that they're feeling they have to grasp for anything, but they're also concerned that it might mean they can't change into a different department another time. Have you got any kind of, I suppose you obviously do have the experience with that.
Yeah, I mean,
any thoughts on that?
Well, first and foremost, I think paralegaling as a whole, traditionally, it's always been seen as kind of like a second option. Don't worry, all else fails, you can do that. But now, having had experience of doing it that way, I don't, like I said, I don't think I would choose to do it a different way, just because I think in terms of my progression thereafter, I worked just as efficiently and as in on a path that gets me to a more senior role as quickly, if not more, than if I had taken the traditional route. That's personally for me, though. I know it doesn't work like that for everyone, and it also can lead to the right opportunity. So for me, like I said, I started off in that dual role. The firm that I went in for, I knew had a medical negligence department. And because I'd done my dissertation on medical law, in my mind, I was like, I'd really like to work in that area. It took me into kind of, it was the perfect combination of medicine, which I was really interested in, but did not want to be a doctor, and law, and kind of put them together. And there are so many different aspects to it that I knew it was something that I wanted to do, but I didn't know if I was going to be lucky enough to get into a firm that did it. And at that stage, medical negligence was very different to what it is now. I think now it's far more competitive. A lot more firms are doing it, and it wasn't new at that stage, but the firms weren't investing as much money as they are into it now. The example is the firm that I was working for at the time had 2 senior fee earners, a few PAs. I think that it was a maximum of 4 in the team, and then when I left there was 17. Wow. So I got in at the right time. So they did like internal vacancies. They had one for a paralegal in that department, and I thought, well, yeah, I'm going to go for it. Why not? And I got it. And I think in that respect, it shows that you don't have to go into necessarily the area that you're overly interested in. You need to have some kind of interest to be able to be successful, but it doesn't always have to be the be all and end all. You will get there if you're focused enough. I mean, the biggest example actually was the job in itself, because I'm not too proud to admit I didn't actually get the job even for the paralegal at the start. I'd applied, I'd gone to the interview, thought I did really well, to be honest, and thought, well, maybe I'll get it, and got a call the next week to say, unfortunately, there was just someone who had a little bit more experience. She'd been a paralegal before, and we'll keep you in mind. We definitely will keep you in mind. And in my mind, I thought, well, that's just lip service. I'm not going to hear from them again. That's it. I was crossing that firm off my list of people to apply for. And then literally the week after, another paralegal, I think someone had left, and another paralegal role came up, and they said, look, we did say to you, we were really interested, just didn't have the capacity then. Come along. And I'd started my job the week after that. So within 2 weeks, it all turned around. So
I think it's interesting, anyone applying for jobs at the moment as well, hearing that, because it wasn't, it's very easy to think, oh, I was rubbish, because I wasn't good enough, it's because this, that, and it might actually just be that there was someone else that had just tipped the edge because they had something you didn't. And And often as well, I think when that happens, it might have been that that wasn't the firm for you. So not to feel disheartened, you know, if you don't end up at this firm that you applied for because you
Yeah.
maybe weren't the right fit for the role, you know. So yeah, I think
I mean,
that's
what I found, what I did, and I don't know if this made any difference, is one, in the interview, obviously you always have to be very engaged and go in and know your stuff. But after the, even I got the rejection, I emailed and I said, look, I had a really good experience. I really do hope to hear from you again. If I don't, I'm really glad to even got to interview stage. I don't know if that contributed to it, but I think having that level of engagement, showing that you're resilient in that way, can sometimes speak volumes.
I think for your own kind of self-worth and kind of
Yeah.
mindset as well, because what you're doing then is you're changing the story in
Yeah.
your head. You're not saying I was rejected. What you're saying was I didn't get the role. I had a
Yeah.
really good kind of interview experience. And I think often, you know, it's our perception of event that actually impacts on our thoughts, our emotions around it. So if we can actually do those clever hacks and kind of, you know, change it, I think for your own mental resilience, it's actually a really, really good tip. So anyone that is listening to
You'll find everyone's doing that now.
yeah, everyone will be doing it now. Everyone's like, where's this trend came from? So in terms of you were paralegaling, you ended up kind of actually getting this paralegal role in the clinical negligence kind of department that you wanted for. And then how did that lead to you getting your traineeship and going forward as well?
Well, I worked, and like I said, my original plan was a year, and then I'm out. I want to go and do my LPC full time, and then see what happens, and hopefully go through the traditional route when I go back to doing training on contract applications fully. And it was around the year point that I got this job for the clinical negligence, and I thought, okay, fine, carry this on a little bit longer. But I'm going to stop. I'm going to make the money and then just go to do the LPC. And the job really suited me. I really liked the people I was working for. And I don't know what it is, because thinking back now, it was a risk if it hadn't worked out. But I thought to myself, actually, I need to hang on a bit more longer. And they were really interested in me staying. So I had a really supportive manager at the time, and they kind of came up with a plan for me to do the LPC part-time and progress in the clinical negligence route as a paralegal. But I mean, because of the fact that they were only developing at the time, the types of jobs I was doing was probably a little bit different to what a paralegal would do now, because we were developing and expanding the team. So my role kind of went from assisting with getting new business in, working with new clients to work out and assess their cases, working on cases. So I did quite a lot, probably a little bit more than a paralegal would do now, because of the fact that they were at the early stages of expanding. And that's another reason why in my mind I thought, well, actually I've got to stay here, because this could be an opportunity for me. I was enjoying it, and I think that's a key thing. If you're enjoying something, it's really difficult to walk away from it, even if it did mean, and I will be honest, doing the LPC part-time and having like a full caseload of clinical negligence cases wasn't the easiest thing to do. But I'm really glad I did. I'm glad I did it.
And so they offered you a traineeship after that, is that?
Yeah, so I'd proved myself in the field, and then they did have some training contract posts in-house, and I was lucky enough, after going through the application process, to get one. And then I did my whole training contract experience within the firm. It was probably somewhat of a different experience for me, because I did the seats, but I did carry on with my caseload as well, because I had clients I needed to service. And I think I'd already had a sense there. And like I said, again, in hindsight, it probably was a bit of a risk, because I was putting a lot of my eggs in one basket, but I knew that it was what I wanted to do. So I did that. But the good thing about getting to do the seats is that I could get an idea of other areas. I think my experience was some of the areas that I didn't want to work in, but that was good to know and to be able to learn that I tried it out and it wasn't really for me.
Yeah, that's interesting as well, because I was going to ask you that question, because I think it is really great having a kind of a focus and a drive towards a certain area, but sometimes do you think it can hold you back as well in terms of maybe even just it feels even more, you know, difficult if you don't end up getting that department, if you're very from day one, this is what I want to do? Or what's your kind of thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is that element to it, but if it's I think I was in somewhat of a privileged position in the fact that I found this area that I really had a passion for. I was excited by it. I connected with it, and I think that's a major thing. Is I connected with the clients, I connected with what we were trying to achieve. If I hadn't connected with it, I think I would have found it really difficult to do all of that at the same time as doing my seats and all of the other things that are connected with a training contract in terms of the vocational element. I think, I'm not going to say it isn't risky, but I think if you're really connecting with an area and you think it could be something that you'd be good at, and that, like I said, it kind of goes back to the benefit of the paralegal experience I had even before getting the training contract. I'd had that experience to be able to know that I worked in that field and in that type of work. If I hadn't had that, I don't think I would have had the confidence to know that, and I would have pushed for more of a traditional arrangement.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
Mm.
I do think as well. So how it must have been, really interesting being. I must say as well that it sounds like you did more as a paralegal than I did as a trainee. When you were talking about some of those things, I was like, oh, I don't think I did that, and I was, however many years qualified.
Yeah.
But yeah, in terms of being in a department that's growing, that must be really, really exciting. But it must also be really difficult as the kind of the team expands, different people are entering, different personalities, different challenges, and just kind of balancing that kind of level of work as well. So have you got any thoughts on that, or how did you balance that?
Yeah, it was really hard. I mean, like I said, for especially for 2 of the years that we were expanding, I was doing my LPC part-time, so I was doing it in the weekend, so a lot of my free time was going on that. I obviously was trying to have a life outside of it, and then the work in expanding the department was quite full on. But I think the way that I took it is that I could, bit by bit, we could see that the work that we were doing was working, and more clients were coming in. The firm was getting a bigger appreciation for the work that we did, and the value of that, financially, and also in terms of how the firm worked, because my previous firm was more of it was a private client exclusively, so the type of work that we did fit in quite well with that. But I mean, if you're talking about in terms of the dynamics of expanding, it's interesting, because I did it at quite a young age, and I contributed to it at quite a young age. So when we were getting people in initially, we were expanding internally. So people from other departments were coming in who were of varying levels. And I suppose the dynamics of someone who technically is probably a few levels above you having to be trained by you it was quite interesting, and I'm not gonna lie, it always worked. But I think what spoke volumes is the fact that I had the experience, I had the confidence to be able to do it, and the structure that we kind of built up along the way was that it was quite collaborative. Everyone worked together, so it didn't really, I think for those coming in, I could see from their perspective it would be a little bit of a challenge. It would almost see a bit of a threat that someone below you in the structural sense was training you. But I think once they were in, they realized how it worked, and that we were really just trying to work together to get the cases worked on. Because our area of law, it isn't that you don't work alone. In clinical negligence cases, we have to have a team. We have to have paralegals working with fee earners, and a lot of the time the paralegals are actually just doing a lot of the same work, but under supervision, because of the way in which we're expected to work, because of cost budgeting and that type of thing. So yeah, it was a learning experience, but one which I'm really glad I had, because I think I've used the experience since.
Yeah,
my advantage.
It does sound like a lot of your experience, and especially in terms of communication, has came from paralegaling and being in that environment in a way that you might never have been able to. Because I do think as a trainee, it's often quite difficult to feel like you can develop those skills, because you feel like the people above you and around you are kind of dictating towards you in the nicest possible way, just because of the hierarchy, and it can almost feel like you don't really have the flexibility to kind of, because you want to impress, you want to you obviously do as a paralegal as well, but it's a slightly, I think in some ways it's a little bit more relaxed, because it's not like you're on assessment for these 6 months and move on, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the time you're working when you're a paralegal, you're working with the person that
Yeah.
you're working for, as opposed to just being handed stuff. So it's a really good training exercise as well, because you're not working on things that are abstract. You're working on something that's going to go out that same day, that's being supervised, and you're learning as you go along. You're learning from your mistakes as well, and in an environment that if you're working for the right person, and I will emphasize that if you're working for the right person, it can be really, really educational.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you have any kind of thoughts or any tips for anyone at the moment if they maybe are facing that kind of feeling, feeling a bit disheartened, like you said you were yourself?
I would say just keep trying. It is a numbers game. Get out there and network. I mean, I think one thing that is very different now than when I was doing is social media, and I'm trying to make the most use out of that now. But I think it's good that that's there, because you've got a forum in which you can stand out from other people from the comfort of your home. So it's really good to connect. It's good to be focused on what you want, because I think sometimes if you're kind of just sending out application after application, and admittedly looking back, that's actually what I was doing. I'm not sure if I was focused enough on the area that I wanted to work in, which not everyone knows, but if you do, it's great. And the way in which I wanted to present myself, because I think that's one of the things that speaks volumes when you're going into a new place. If you're different from yourself, and the only way you're going to be different by yourself from other people is by being yourself. That's one of the main things. You've got to work to your own strengths and not what you think a firm wants, because I think nowadays, with so much emphasis, especially on the bigger firms with graduate recruitment departments, they can see through someone who's trying to kind of say something that's that they think you want to hear. It's a lot better to go in with your own story, go in with your own strengths, and capitalize on that, as opposed to something that you think they want to hear.
And I definitely think as well that at the moment, there's such a big drive for kind of diversity and inclusion and social
Yes.
mobility, that firms actually genuinely, do have started to, I definitely think, really realize the importance of people having different backgrounds, whether that's life experience, work experience, not coming straight from uni, coming from, a different degree, whatever it might be. I definitely saw that was something that was building when I was training, and that was, solidly 10 or so years ago, that when I was training, that even more so now, it is just a different kind of environment as well. So I think by being yourself, you're able to actually show what you're going to bring to the team, because it's not a lack of academic credentials that are ever going to hold you back. Everyone's got the academic credentials. What about you as a person? What is it that you are? Are you very empathetic? Do you have, really great communication skills because you were a waitress for 5 years? Like, what was it? But I do think those things are what make you stand out now.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I think that's just it, like the experience you gave as a waitress. I think what people sometimes miss is the benefit of the experience that they do have. For example, I mean, before I had any type of leaving experience, like during holidays during school holidays and university holidays, I used to work in call centers. I'd worked with a few charities. My own life experience generally, in terms of coming from a big family and learning how to kind of manage that and the commitments that it brings. I think realizing the experience that you do have, and actually putting that in the face of your potential employer or your present ones to justify promotion or whatever, is really good. Because I think one of the things that discourages people when they're early on in their career, especially legal career, is that they just don't have enough experience, or they don't have the right personality or the right fit for a certain firm. And I think that what they forget is actually, if they looked beyond the persona of the people that work for a firm, a lot of people, we actually celebrate, like at the firm that I work at the moment, we celebrate diversity, we celebrate people who come from different backgrounds, because it's those different perspectives that are going to bring something new to the table. They don't want someone who's it's good to have people who've been down the traditional route. It's good to have people who've done things kind of in a uniform way as well. But having a few people who haven't is always great, I think. And it especially the area of work that we do, we're speaking to everyday people. We're speaking to clients who have experienced a lot, and they don't necessarily want to speak to someone who they feel, even though it wouldn't necessarily be the case, but they feel that is talking down to them. They want to know that you've experienced and you know what they're going through. And so that mention that you made of empathy is really important, because if you haven't got that, because it's not in everyone, but if you don't have that, then certain areas of law probably aren't for you, because you're going to have to use a lot of empathy, especially with what we do.
Yeah, no, really important. And I think there's definitely much more of a conversation being had now around about, firstly, mental health in the legal industry. I think that's been such a hot topic for the last few years, just understanding how, working in a high pressure environment is going to have a negative impact on your mental health if you don't do certain, things. So there's an openness. Resilience has been something, we're doing a lot of resilience training and giving people the tools they need to set themselves up for long-term success. But the thing that we've seen being, hugely important, and especially since lockdown, has been emotional intelligence. So things like empathy, things like self-awareness, things like motivation, because especially when you're not working in that legal and in the kind of office environment, it's more difficult to kind of develop those skills. If you're quite insular and quite isolated in the way that you're working, which is a byproduct of the situation many of us have found ourselves in. I've worked from home for about 5 or 6 years, and I must say it's really, really challenging if you don't kind of make an active kind of decision to do these. So things like empathy does come from having that self-awareness and starting to kind of look for opportunities to develop these skill sets, because I do think that the academic qualifications, if you're applying, you have those, but how can you start to develop the other sides? And it might be, like you said, working for a charity or having, experience in a call center. The other thing I'd say as well is that you don't have to do everything. You don't have to be, completely active on LinkedIn, Instagram, having a blog. You don't have to do everything. It's pick something that feels really right to you and then develop that. I think is a really genuine way of kind of learning more about the industry and making genuine connections rather than what can this person do for me.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I think the word genuine is the main thing there. I think going back to what I was saying before, a lot of the time, I think, and I've seen it in front of me as well, is that people are kind of saying what they think you want to hear. And actually what could be better is if you just tell your story as it is, or act in a way that is genuine for you. And having that kind of diversity in the workplace that's what makes you interesting. And I think if a potential employer is looking at you, they're kind of looking at what you can bring to the table that no one else can. And that's what you should focus on, I think.
Yeah, no, that's so true. And we've obviously spoken about a lot about people who are maybe making applications at the moment, but in terms of people who are maybe finding, them coming up to qualification period or their traineeships being deferred, is there anything that you kind of think, any insight, you could give to people? Because I have seen a lot of trainees, now doing things like paralegal jobs or kind of, informal roles that they maybe hadn't anticipated because they thought they were going to start or they thought they were going to qualify. They've had to feel maybe like they're taking a step back. And I think you're kind of saying that actually the skills you gain from that, you are never stepping back. You're only kind of setting yourself up for success.
Yeah, and you're also showing a commitment to yourself in terms of furthering yourself, even if it's not particularly the area that you want to work in. There are always skills that you can learn from them and connections that you can make, which you don't know where those connections can take you. So I would never see it as a sideways step or a step down. I just see it as a different path, which may lead you to something else. And I found that throughout my career, that there are certain things that happen or directions that you take that you couldn't even have anticipated, but actually may work out to be the best thing. And I think that having that confidence in yourself and I suppose I'm going to get very philosophical, but fate, that everything will work out in the end is really important. I understand that's not really easy to do at certain times, given especially now because everything's so uncertain. But if there are opportunities out there which you might not otherwise have looked at, I think it is always worth taking a second look. And it doesn't even have to be legal. It could be things that are connected. So like, I mean, I often think, well, what would I do if I'm not doing what I'm doing now? And a lot of the work that I've been doing with medical negligence has been towards patient safety, has been working with a lot of charities, medical charities, of people who have suffered various things. I've learned a lot about things random areas like rehab, because a lot of our clients need extensive rehab if they've suffered a really serious injury. And I think, well, actually, I'd really like to be able to capitalize on those types of skills and education that I've received over the years, and how could I do that? So I think there's a lot to be said to thinking outside the box of what you can do with your skills, and not just kind of pigeonholing yourself at a time where perhaps it's very difficult. And get out there and speak to people, because I think when I speak to people around me, I'm really amazed sometimes at what people have done with their skills, even with their law skills in different areas. And that doesn't mean you can't come back to law. You always can. I think it's just being creative with the circumstances and your own skills and abilities that is really important.
And I think it's so easy as well, especially when there's so much uncertainty. You know, we're kind of designed, our mind's actually biologically designed to look for what is bad, what is going wrong. And it's easy to focus on maybe the 5% that's maybe not exactly as you'd like it, or the 5% that feels a little bit bad at this point, versus focusing on the 95% that is going well. And I know, like, for myself, when I actually qualified, so I loved property law. Like, I liked it. It was tangible. It made sense to me as compared to things like finance. I never understood. I still don't know to this day what a bond is. Like, it's just, I'd imagine it.
Don't ask me.
No idea. It never stuck with me. I was just like, no. But actually, you know, when it came to qualifying, there was a number of different circumstances that meant that I couldn't qualify into the property department. My second choice, and it was quite a close second choice, was litigation, because I loved the kind of demands of it, and I loved the group actually as well. Like, as a group of personalities, they were a really interesting bunch of people to work with. So I actually, you know, said at that point, do you know what, I'm really interested in property law and property litigation. And some people maybe wouldn't have said that, because they would have thought, actually, I can't say that because they might think that I'm not interested in just litigation, or they might think I was their second choice. But I kind of actually did voice that, and everyone was so amazing at trying to kind of pull me onto, you know, matters that involved, even if it was just
a little bit,
much property litigation when I was, but you know, even if it was just a little element, people would try and kind of help me in that way. So I think that's another thing as well, that actually just kind of being quite open about where you're at and where you're, you know, where you'd like to go. I think that people do go out of their way more than you would expect to help you and to give you that experience, more than thinking, well, why are you doing that? They don't see it as a negative. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, just by virtue, one of the things that I do with my firm at the moment is I go to some of the local universities and do presentations about my area of law and my story. And off the back of that, I've had a few students who contact me saying, like, I really want to do your area of law. How do I do it? I just don't know what I'm going to do. And actually, I've really respected that. I've respected the fact that they've kind of gone out of their way to contact me, because it shows that they're conscientious. I may not be able to be in a position to actually help them, but I could have mentored a few of them. I've spoken to them about things that they can do, about firms that they can approach. And I think that type of mindset of not just kind of being happy just to have things happen and actually make things happen yourself is really important nowadays. And that's, if there's anything I could say to anyone who in either applications or who's worried about where they're at the moment, is try and make as many things happen as possible and connect, because somewhere along the line, if you're the thought that comes on to, if a job comes up or if an opportunity comes up and you're in that person's network, then you've got a better chance than if you weren't at achieving something. And that achieving something may be a job, it may be an event that you go to where you meet someone, it could be anything. But I think just taking yourself outside your comfort zone, because it's not, I mean, anyone who's starting up, I myself included, when I first kind of came into law, being, and I will say it, a young Asian girl, not really having attended events like that before. I've got a very big family, so probably the biggest events I attended were like 8 big Asian weddings, and that's probably about it. And suddenly I was in this forum where I had to go to events where I was meeting other legal professionals, medical professionals, barristers, and at the start, I think I felt a little bit out of my depth. And then I think after a few events, I realized actually everyone's human. Everyone has got experiences outside of law, which they talk about probably more than we want to talk about shop when we're together. And if I can draw on my own experiences to connect with people, that's probably actually going to work out better for me than trying to at that stage where I'm relatively new in my career, trying to talk about an area where I'm still learning. And I think that's respected. I think, especially when I'm talking to people, when I'm mentoring people, I'm not necessarily looking to talk about the law. They might want to talk about it with me, but a lot of the time you just want to talk about life and their experiences and things that are happening to them. And as long as you're open to speaking about yourself and being willing to kind of let people in, I think that can be reciprocated to your benefit in the long run.
Yeah, and the other thing as well is like asking people questions. So I didn't expect maybe someone to go, okay, she works in, does mental health and resilience training. I need to tell her about everything I know about it. If they ask me a question, it then means I can give them my experience being the expert, in the same way that if you do find yourself in a situation where you're networking or whatever, instead of kind of feeling like you need to contribute by giving information, it can be just as simple as asking information. And I think you can do that in a way that doesn't, I know that people are very reluctant to ask questions because they're scared in case it makes it seem like they don't know something. But I think that's kind of expected of someone that's a junior member.
Yeah, I think anyone who's honest and took themselves back to that stage would realise that they had those same questions at that point in time. And I've actually often been asked questions where I'm kind of like, I wish I'd asked that when I was your age. You respect it, and at the end of the day, if, like I said, everyone's human, and I can see it when someone's asking me questions, or if someone's approached me on LinkedIn or anything. I respect that, because I think, well, they're in a situation that I was in, and all they want to do is get further, get ahead, be able to work in something they've got a passion for. If they're willing to kind of go out and are willing to put themselves out on a limb to contact me, the least I can do is respond and engage.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think we've got a responsibility to do that, because I think traditionally the law profession has been seen as something that's possibly not as accessible as it actually is, in terms of diversity, in terms of class, and being willing to give that impression that actually, no, people of all backgrounds are welcome, people of all abilities are welcome, as long as you show your commitment and you show that you're willing to ask the right questions, willing to put the work in. I think it can only be a good thing, and having the attitude where you don't want to engage perhaps can give the wrong impression of yourself, of the firm, of the profession. It's always good to engage.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, well, many people will find this session, this interview so useful, just whether it's, seeing themselves as a paralegal, or maybe even reminiscing about their time as a paralegal and thinking, actually, I did learn a lot there. I need to stop kind of, putting a negative spin on it. I always end up the interviews by asking a couple of questions. So the first thing I'd love to know is, what does resilience mean to you?
So for me personally, it's being able to draw on my own experiences to be able to meet any challenges that come across, because not everything will be plain sailing. Personally, professionally, things aren't linear. They do take turns, and I think using your experience of when things go wrong and to your advantage when things may go wrong again is always a good thing. And I think being able to adapt to your situation, your circumstances, to the people around you, it makes you more resilient. So yeah, I mean, I think for me, resilience really is just using the benefit of your experience to turn situations around.
Amazing. And in terms of, this podcast is very centered around kind of setting yourself up for sustainable success. So I'd love to know, what would be your number one tip for junior lawyers to find that sustainable success within the legal profession?
Just the one.
You can
I can give more. So I think a major one, and it is a cliche, is to be yourself. Don't be that person who just tells people what they want to hear. Bring your personality out. If you probably are more interesting than you think, so bring that out when you're speaking to people. Network, connect, and engage with people, because everyone's got the academics. We wouldn't really be in law if you didn't, but actually being able to show something different and bringing something else to the table is the main thing. And don't also be afraid of like things failing. There are always other ways of making things happen. I think my story shows that, because I I didn't really go down the traditional route. I had a few rejections along the way, but I still managed to get here in the end. And if anything that can show you is that if you just kind of show your resilience and adapt to your situation, you can make things work for yourself. And don't be afraid to ask for help, because everyone's been in the same situation.
Yeah, I like how you managed to weave an extra few in there. I'll
oh no, of course, yeah.
Once a lawyer, always a lawyer. No, joking.
Yeah.
And I think that's so true as well when you say about being yourself. And actually, as cliche as it is, I haven't had many people say that. Everyone says communicate. But I always remember hearing, you know, someone said to me, or reading somewhere, I can't remember quite where I picked it up, but, you know, other people's opinion of you is none of your business. And that's really stuck with me, because I think as long as you're coming from a genuine place, as long as you're trying to do your best for yourself and for other people, no, maybe not everyone's going to like you. Maybe not everyone's going to like your shirt or your hair or whatever it is, or your background, whatever that might be. As long as you're coming from a genuine place and you're trying to progress yourself forward, I think being yourself is one of the most important things. So I'm really glad that you've shared that one, because it's definitely something that at times I really battled with within the legal industry, and especially, you know, going into a firm like Slaughter May, which was amazing, and I was looking at everyone around me thinking, oh, I don't know if I fit in or not, you know, coming from a slightly different background from maybe your traditional kind of magic circle law firm trainee, especially kind of previously, not so much you know, like that now,
No.
or trainee, but it definitely did kind of feel so. I think being able to draw your own personality out is a really good tip. And the final thing I'd love to ask you is who inspires you within the legal industry and you would love to see on the podcast?
I see. Now again, I'm going to go in line with the last one and give you two. So
right.
There was a third-year law professor that really, really inspired me. Spoke about the law in a way that I had never heard about it, and I think at that time, like I was saying before, I was really kind of getting disheartened on whether I was going to take this route, and he really persuaded me to. And then also my managing partner now, who I've actually worked with for the whole of my career, would have to be another person as well. She's kind of seen me through the dips and the highs of my career, and I think I couldn't not be inspired by someone like that, because they've seen in me at times things that I didn't even see in myself. So it's been inspiring for me to kind of go on that journey with her.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak to me today. I know you're very busy and lots is going on, but I think, you know, a lot of people feel really inspired by your story, and also just kind of feeling, you know, a little bit more empowered as well, and a little bit more certain in amongst them, in themselves, that they are, you know, progressing their career, even if it isn't in the traditional way that they maybe anticipated or they'd planned. So thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me today.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Before we finish, I just wanted to say thank you everyone for joining us, and you know, I just wanted to point you to the Leading Minds website, leadingmindsglobal.com, where you can actually subscribe to be kept up to date with weekly episodes of our podcast, so they're straight in your inbox before everyone else sees them. And also follow us on LinkedIn at Leading Minds, to make sure that you are kind of given, you know, tips for sustainable success within the legal industry. So thank you everyone for joining me, and thank you again, Sharon. Thank you.
Thank you.